Have anyone to do minutes?
What?
You don't have anyone to do minutes. I can keep up best I can if you want to start.
You're a good minute taker.
There ain't anybody coming up the stairs?
I'll double check.
I guess
I'll keep up.
not. Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the August 17th, 2021 meeting of the Planning Board to order. First of all, I want to introduce the members of the Planning Board. Over to the left is Susan Repley here. Next to Susan is Peter Goodwin. Mike Hodder is the vice chairman of the Planning Board. To my right, John Thurston. And then next to John, Brad Harriman, who is the representative from the Board of Selectmen. And sitting next to Brad is Julie Jacobs, who is an alternate. Julie Von Dugan is not going to be here. Would you be willing to sit in for her?
Sure, I will.
Thank you. Okay. All right. And Tavis is here, the planning director. There are no public hearings tonight. So the next item on the agenda is a discussion of some pending items. And the first one is the Pine Hill Road Development District, some amendments we have been talking about.
Madam Chair, I just want to go on record as recusing myself from the discussion on the Pine Hill Road section here.
All right, thank you. Okay, Tavis, you've prepared some amendments for us. And, you know, I did relook at things, and the light contractor's yard is a permitted use, not a special permit use. Sorry, my apologies. Okay, and that's the way it is in the ordinance now.
So contractor's yard light belongs in permitted uses.
Yes,
and
right.
contractor's yard.
Heavy goes back into special
And
exception.
heavy is what I guess we're proposing.
Well, that's where we left off at the last meeting, but I had Kathy review, because the only thing different in what you have this evening from the last work session was I went back, instead of having everything be as it would look, I went back and made it look like track changes to put the changed language, or in other words, those uses coming from C2 into Pine Hill, I put in red and then let the system renumber. The only modifications to that are the discussions that came out of this board at the last work session,
Right.
plus the input from Kathy just before the packets went together.
Right, and it's the light contractor's yard should be permitted, and then the other contractor's yard would be special exception. That's basically what we talked about.
Yeah, that was discussed on the 31st of July. There are several other, I sent you an email, Tavis, you may not have seen it. I sent you a copy to Kathy as well. I compared what you submitted this time with what we left off on the 31st of July as having agreed to, and I found a few areas that I wanted to question tonight. And if I may, can I go through them piece by piece?
Go ahead.
17596D, seasonal outside storage. When we discussed this last time, this had not been included because it was understood that seasonal outside storage was a permitted use, so to speak, and didn't need to be specifically mentioned as a use in this district. It's simply allowed anyway. So I would suggest delete D, as we had originally done.
Can I just ask, if this is going to be there, you can put stuff in that
in property storage, but their use for living or business while so stored is prohibited, who's going to enforce that?
I'm sorry, what now?
Word D.
Yeah.
I mean, it says you can put it into this place, but who's going to say that you know, I go out and I want to use my snow blower that I put there? It's like, who's going to enforce that particular
Well,
thing?
that's always a question with all zoning, isn't it? Who's going to enforce it?
Well,
you
and
sort
it
of-
just, it seems, and I don't understand what that means, so I would delete it.
And we're in agreement.
Just in practice, that has never, to my understanding, never been used for something like a snow blower or a lawnmower. But somebody pulls their boat out at Goodhue and needs to store it, or somebody has a camper, travel trailer, RV, what have you, and they want to store it on their property, things like that. I agree with removing it.
Continuing on then, in F, note 3,
Okay, so is it out or in?
out.
Out.
It was out,
Yeah,
July
right,
31st is
right,
out now.
Yeah, okay.
In F, note 3 says the use shall require a change of use permit and compliance with all applicable building and life safety codes. Fine. How would that affect new office construction? If I wanted to come into this district and build a bunch of offices,
It wouldn't.
it wouldn't. Then do we necessarily need that, or do we need to specify somewhere?
I would suggest you don't need one anywhere note 1 is used, because any use that is not residential requires site plan anyway.
Anyway,
and that's
yes.
all 1 says.
Do we want to delete 1 and leave 3?
I think 1 and 3 could come out.
Both delete. Delete 1 and 3 on number F.
Storage facilities would then become 1, just so people don't get,
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so both of them are coming out.
Right, and
Yeah, okay.
number 2 becomes number 1. Continuing on, letter P, this is just grammatical stuff. It doesn't make grammatical sense as written. Suggest that we change the word "and" after permitted use to the word "with," and put a period after the word "parking," and delete "is required."
Okay, so conversion of a permitted use to another permitted use with no change to the exterior of the building or parking.
Period. That's
Yeah.
a permitted use.
Right, yep. So is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
But at the same time, we have in M, we have assembly operations with a note 1, which we just deleted.
Thank you, delete that.
Correct.
correct, that would come out.
So do you delete the 1?
So
We delete that one.
mentally remove all of the superscripts that you see typed and apply the new 1, which was the old 2 for storage facilities,
Right,
for
and
storage.
in J, where you see note 2, make
Correct.
that note 1.
Yes, J becomes 1, M has no superscript.
But we'll get a new copy of this, so you don't have to worry about it.
Oh, yeah.
In addition, previous iteration, laundries and cleaning establishments were permitted uses, and they're not on this list now. Was there a reason why they were removed?
Yes. Further to amend.
Where are you at, Mike?
That was part of Article 5 in 2020. Further to amend the permitted use sections to remove the following uses: printing plants, community service, assembly operations, storage, and use of heavy industrial and mechanical equipment, metal shops, and laundries, and cleaning
Okay,
establishments.
so that's gone then, all righty.
Well, that's why they were removed from this draft, is because they'd been removed. The board has every ability to put them back in if you want them.
Well, then we have to put it back on the warrant. There's no point doing that.
I'm just,
So they're out, they're out. I was just going through, did not have that reference. Contractors' yards, we know. Contractors' yards light goes back into permitted. Contractors' yards heavy goes into E. Query, assuming that we run the same type for contractors' yard heavy as we did for light, why is the old paragraph D, the compliance paragraph, not in the new text?
Contractor's yard includes a D. D is not included in contractor's yard light. So D could apply, or if contractor's yard,
Contractor's yard light did have a D in the original iteration.
Right.
It should have a D in the new iteration, and it should have a D. The contractor's yard heavy should also have a paragraph D.
well, my,
Compliance of some sort.
my understanding from the chair was that light was not to have the fuel storage. Because functionally speaking, contractor's yard and contractor's yard light are exactly identical other than the size of the vehicle going to them. I
Correct.
don't really know the relevance.
But they've got to have somewhere to keep their diesel and their
Yeah.
oil and those sorts of volatiles, and they'll have to be in compliance with some state standards, and that's why I thought we had D.
Well, they have to, D refers to a standard they have no choice to comply with anyway.
Agreed?
So I thought the only distinction functionally between a permitted use and a special exception use would be said storage, similar to storage of volatile fuels that has moved from permitted in C2 to special exception.
What are you suggesting?
What's that?
What are you suggesting?
Oh, I'd suggest a lot of things. I'm just trying to find consistency.
Retain D for the special exception and not retain D for the permitted use?
That was the understanding I had in my discussion with Kathy about contractor's yard light not having fuel storage.
Well, we originally had it in the first iteration. It didn't seem to bother anybody, and I think it provided additional
I will add,
protection to the
I will
town.
add D to both.
I would if I would ask you if you would. And then,
And while we're on contractor's
Pardon?
yards, does the new note 1 apply? Storage facility setback 150 feet?
Yes.
yeah, sure,
Yes,
of course.
Yeah,
Okay, I
does.
just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that we pointed out last time. If I continue on, number H, cemeteries for human beings was dropped from the list on the July 31st
Okay.
discussion. And in J, there is no town water or sewer after Bay Street on Pine, so there's no
Correct.
point keeping that text. I'd simply put nonprofit housing for the elderly, period.
Agreed.
And there does need to be a period after that, and there's none.
Yeah, just stick a period after the word elderly, and then we're golden. And that is all that I have, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, weren't we going to include workforce housing under nonprofit housing for the elderly and workforce?
Nonprofit, workforce, or elderly. So it would be housing for elderly, nonprofit, or workforce.
Good. What text do you want?
Housing for elderly, workforce, or affordable. That might get a subsequent revision before going to warrant if I'm able to get you, after tonight's discussion, a revised draft of all of those special groups in the current regulations put into one category.
Why don't we make that note on J with a subnote to say that we will be revisiting this following the planner's revision of the housing ordinances that we hope to do, and
Yeah,
the
my
crafting of
guess
a
is it's going to be
HOZ.
coined inclusionary housing will be the new title of the collective, but the footnote for now is sufficient for me.
Just call housing and umbrella housing, and then we'll come back to that.
In the notes, it says storage facilities shall be set back from all state numbered highways. Is there any number associated with that? Or is that just, I mean, I could set it back 1 foot, I could set it back 10 feet, I could set it back 150 feet.
I think the
150
notes
feet.
are going to be the same as they are under permitted uses with the revised number 1. Storage facility shall be set back 150 feet from all state numbered highways, and the existing vegetation shall be preserved in said setback.
So if, but I'm looking at the note, and the note doesn't seem to follow, but
We're just going to add it.
Fine.
So can we go back to the first page and talk about D again? The seasonal outside storage of items of personal property, are we taking that out?
Yes,
Yes.
Why are we taking that out?
because you can do it.
I know, but it says the,
Personal property on residential lots, you can store your stuff on your house lot
yes,
as long as it's not an eyesore.
maybe I'm missing the point why it's in red italics.
It doesn't even have to be there because it's a right you have anyway. If you can store your car in your driveway, right? If you want to, no one can tell you.
Yeah, but
you're
I
allowed
think the point that one's trying to make is when you have your snowmobile trailer or your camper, it's recommended that it's stored off to the side or the rear of the lot and not in the front yard.
We don't
have
have
in
a
your
law that
driveway.
prevents you from parking in your front yard
Yeah,
right now.
there's no law that says you have to park your snowmobile on the side of the house.
Your neighbors might not like it,
I
but
just think
you
that's
can.
I think that's a clutter situation. I think we're trying to protect the integrity of the neighbor across the street rather than having it look like a Sanford and Son in the front yard. I think it's
Can't really, regulate taste.
Yeah,
well, you can regulate taste because if
I like
somebody's
my
got
shovels on my porch in the summer.
I don't think it's meant to that. I think because it talks about living use, and what we're talking about is a camper that somebody's going to store in their front yard. And the camper should go off to the side or to the rear, so people don't have to stare at the thing all year long.
So one
I see what
possible
you're
way
saying.
to,
I see what's gotten you upset, John.
currently the term yard is defined as any open space that lies between the principal building or group of buildings and the nearest lot line and is unoccupied by any structure unless specifically permitted, and is further defined as front yard, side yard, rear yard, or front yard. So you could say, with an amendment to the definition, and not have to have the seasonal outside storage.
I mean, I'm not talking about your snow blower, your ladder, or anything like that. We're talking about larger,
Well, right now, if you were to store a camper on the side of your house and then have your buddy live in it, that would be prohibited whether or not there was an ordinance, because it was be out of code, would it not?
well, no, it's a dwelling when somebody's living in it.
Yeah, but that would be, you can't have two dwellings on the same lot.
That's correct.
So that would be
basically what you're trying
prohibited
to-
anyway.
I think it's a mistake if you take that out. I
We're
think,
just talking about not having someone living in it, but just having it there. That's what we're talking about.
So again, my suggestion would be a modification to the definition of yard. To read any open space that lies between the principal building or group of buildings and the nearest lot line and is unoccupied by any structure, comma, vehicle, comma, trailer, or similar. That's because that gets away from the snow blower and the lawnmower and Julie shovels or
give me an example. Give me an example,
travel trailer,
okay? So-
camper, utility trailer, dump truck.
Okay,
Car.
so it's permitted in your front
No.
yard.
No, if you modify yard to preclude, and you could do this specifically only with front yard, unoccupied by structures, vehicle, trailer, or,
So when we go down South Main Street or North Main Street, we want to see boats and trailers parked in the front yard.
no, you're
Right-
missing
right
it.
now-
What I'm saying is right now, yard definition only precludes structures. You could modify the definition of front yard to also preclude vehicles, trailers, campers, and similar.
And then you'd have how many scores of residences in town in violation?
I think,
Including mine at times, because I've got stuff stored on the side of my house.
No, but again, I'm just saying the front yard, because we define yard, and then it's further defined as front,
Maybe
side, and
maybe-
rear.
John, the way I read D, and tell me if you think this is correct or not, is that you can store all kinds of stuff on your residential lot as long as it's on the side or the rear. But if you have somebody living in one of those things, that's completely prohibited. That's what D says. So I can store my camper on the side of my house as long as my friend Fred isn't living in there. The minute he lives in there, then I'm in violation.
Okay, I was under the impression that if you took that out, then somebody could put their camper in their front yard and just have that thing sitting there.
Yeah,
If you simply remove D and don't amend setbacks, that could occur, yes.
That would be a travesty.
yeah, right, yeah, I agree.
But all that D
I
is
get to
doing
look
is,
at dump trucks, so what's the difference?
But again, my concern with having D where it is such is not a use of the property. The use of the property is a single-family residence.
exactly.
So this is very finely defining an accessory use of property.
Exactly.
The way to more aptly address it is to modify what's allowed in a
and-
front yard setback.
And all it says is that the things can be placed to the side or rear.
Right,
I mean, what's the harm there?
because it's not a use.
Well,
We're talking about permitted uses, and where that's not a use of the land, that's a behavior.
okay. I think it is a use. If you're parking your trailer in the front yard.
Is it the same kind of use as building a house and calling it your residence?
Probably
making-
not.
No, then it's not the kind of use that's being
It's
defined in these
accessory,
ordinances.
it's accessory to the primary use.
Exactly, it's accessory to the property, accessory to the main use of the property. All that D does, and I'll only argue this one last time, and then I'll just fade, is that you can store your stuff on your property. It shouldn't be an eyesore, so stick it on the side or the back.
Right.
You can't have anybody living in it. That's all it's saying.
But even if it said you could live in it, there's other sections of the regulations that are more restrictive precluding it. Can't have a second single-family home on your
That's the whole
property.
point.
Right.
That's the whole.
So you already can't do what D is saying.
So are we
That's why I
leaving
said
it?
we take it out. You already can't do what D says you can't do, so why do we need D?
However, right now, there's nothing in the definition of yard, specifically front yard, precluding you from parking or storing your car, your boat, your trailer, your whatever.
Just as well, let's not, why do we need to make it any more restrictive than it already is? Let's give the people the opportunity to park their car, their rusty old heap on the side of the house, without
They
telling them they
could park
can't.
it in the front yard.
If they park it in the front yard, the neighbors will complain. Let's let the normal process of neighborhood development go along, rather than make it a prohibited use.
I'm a fisherman, but I don't want to look at somebody's fish shells parked in their front yard all year.
There, I can take you to a whole bunch of them where I know they are right now. I mean, the point is, and I said I was going to fade.
Okay, what is your solution, Tavis?
Well, to address, I don't believe D is the appropriate way to achieve what D is attempting to achieve.
Okay,
So my recommendation would be that D come out, and I come back with language modifying the definition of front yard to avoid the scenario of parking vehicles
okay,
in the
and
front
just
yard.
give us a brief definition of what that would be. That would,
Yard front, open space that lies between the front face of the principal building or group of buildings and the nearest lot line or front lot line that is unoccupied by any structure, vehicle, trailer, or trailered vehicle or similar, unless specifically permitted.
is that okay?
I didn't.
Something along those
Yeah,
lines.
okay.
Come back with some.
Yeah, okay, that would be good.
That also,
Yeah.
it will probably have to include something along the lines of excluding those vehicles parked in an approved driveway, because some people get very literal about that. As soon as somebody fills the garage and then they try and park two vehicles in their driveway, one of them is at least in part in the front yard setback. But I don't think the board wants to go after people parking in their driveway.
No,
No,
no. Can I have a turn?
restrictive
Okay,
enough
yeah,
as it is.
go ahead, Julie.
My turn. I want to skip down to O, where I had been there before.
To where?
O,
Oh, okay.
new and used car dealers. I think this needs to be O and O plus. New and used car dealers, to me, are very separate from automotive and small engine repair shops. Those are two very specific groups of businesses, in my mind.
What do you want to do,
So
make
can
them
we
two
break
separate
it?
sections?
Make it an O and a E plus.
I would
Yes.
also recommend that there's a distinction between automotive repair and auto body work. Perhaps that's when you get into the paint and the bondo and the sanding and the
Yes.
grinding and that. It's very different from an auto repair shop where you're replacing somebody's brakes.
Why not put automotive
Okay.
repair and body shops,
And small engine repair.
As a permitted use?
the permitted use?
Because I can tell you that in Derry, New Hampshire, where we look to open a place, and in Londonderry outlawed all small engine anythings. So if you want your lawnmower repaired anywhere in the town of Londonderry, you're up the creek, because no business can be in that town.
So new and used car dealers are renumbered automotive repair / body shop.
Why do we need it renumbered?
Because we're
there's nothing between O and P.
separating them,
Why are we separating?
because Julie
they're different animals.
suggested it.
It could
Why
e-
does Julie suggest it?
Because Julie feels strongly about small engine repair. I used to be in that business.
No, I'm trying to, for the
both
sake of
permitted.
brevity, automotive and body repair shops.
One is sales.
Small engine repair.
But one is sales and one is repair, in my mind. One is clean, you go into the dealership and buy a new car. The other one is greasy, oily, messy, gross. That's two
There's
separate
no-
things to me.
there's-
You don't think there's anything different?
Okay, two separate.
So new and used car dealers and automotive body repair shops and small engine repair is a new number.
Right.
Okay.
Tell me one again because I can't follow. What is O going to read now?
O is new and used car dealerships or dealers,
Period?
period.
Okay. Then we
O
have,
plus is automotive repair and body shops, comma, small engine repair, period.
Thank you.
And just for the record, if somebody came in for a new car dealership, I would not have to reference both the repair work they do and the dealership as a permitted use.
right. So part and parcel to me, but that's, I put a footnote, Julie.
They're
added.
different.
Okay, any other suggestions?
So what if they work on heavy equipment? What if they work on heavy equipment? We don't have,
You want to add to
Yeah, that
automotive
is-
repair then? Automotive and,
you got contractor's yard and you got contractor's yard heavy. Where's the guy gonna work on his dump truck? Can he work on it in his,
An auto repair shop.
okay.
Okay,
Based on almost 9 months, I don't think there's going to be a run on Wolfeboro for heavy equipment repair shops.
I have a question with,
Part of it's sarcastic, and at the same time, it is almost impossible to put in a contractor's yard, so there's a very low demand in town for contractor's yards and the associated equipment, therefore, they're going to be located near someone that allows the yard and the repair.
I have a question on H.
okay.
H reads retail stores and shops, and then goes on to list all their favorites. Do we need any of the favorites, or can we just leave it at retail stores and shops?
I think, for me, retail sales and shops covers everything. It does get a little different when you get into
Indoor theaters,
theater and printing.
printing plant,
Well, it's a plan, but
more than likely
I
plant.
think it's plant.
Wasn't that
And
one
then
of the things that was
public
taken out
recreation
of
and
your?
similar is already
Right,
out.
yeah,
there's different kinds of printing plants and that sort of thing too, so it doesn't really
yeah, printing
say what it
plants.
is.
From a building code perspective, there's functionally no difference between a retail store, shop, and any retail business or personal service.
No.
And a very slight difference when you move to offices. Very distinct difference when you go to restaurants.
So
Okay,
should
well-
those specific things you just mentioned to be broken out individually instead of having them all grouped as one
No,
each?
because otherwise you're going to be running into an ordinance with like 50 different particular specified uses. You can run them all together in a paragraph like we've done here and make it a smaller little body of text. Kathy, you
Okay. But just some of these seemed really redundant and not applicable to me.
So for me,
Right.
retail/stores and shops for the conduct of any retail business or personal service, comma, offices, comma, restaurants, comma, banks, indoor theater, printing plant, and similar uses.
Okay, printing plant was removed last
that's
last
not a
time.
use anymore.
That's,
I
Printing
don't know if
plant is-
anyone does that
yeah,
anymore.
we can definitely.
That's big industry if you're going to call it a printing plant.
And why was public recreation removed?
Well, public by nature does not, I'm recommending remove it because we took all of the other public things as a special exception, government buildings and such things.
Well, question on that then, if I wanted to build another NIC for the public, but it's a private operation, I'm building it myself. Maybe I'm going to run it for commercial uses, or maybe I'm just going to give it to the town when I'm done. That would not be an allowed use if you take that out,
Or a mini golf course,
or mini golf course?
which I think we need.
Mini golf course in the NIC by
Desperately need one of
definition
them.
is actually,
Better one, bigger one with more
it's
parking.
a use that is outlined in many other sections of the ordinance as recreational use. So recreational use, outdoor activities that are operated by an entity other than the unit of government and which are available for use, usually for a fee, including but not limited to golf courses, ice skating rinks, tennis courts, cross-country ski trails, and the rental of non-motorized sports equipment, but excluding games and activities common to amusement parks and arcades.
What are you reading from?
The definition of recreational use.
In our 175, 175?
So can,
Okay.
So you could put, I would put that as a standalone.
Public recreation uses?
Well, or replace public recreation uses with recreational use.
Fine, delete the word public. Change
Okay,
recreation
okay,
to
and is
adverb.
printing plant out?
Yes.
Yep.
So delete the word public in front of recreation, change recreation to recreational.
Use, yeah.
Now we're golden there.
Okay,
I would leave "and similar" at the end of that entire paragraph, though. So retail stores and shops for the conduct of any retail business or personal service, comma, offices, comma, restaurants, comma, banks, comma, indoor theater, comma, recreational use, and similar services.
That seems more generic now.
okay, so is everybody comfortable with the adult-oriented businesses?
Yeah,
No.
whatever.
Well, I'm still working on 17553. I don't know if it more needs to be added in here.
The definition?
Well, the 175-53 was not finished when Rob left it alone. And it lacks an awful lot of protections that we currently don't have. That has to be redone.
In process, but I think for the purposes of this zone, a reference to 17553,
Okay, so-
whether B needs to stay or that gets made part of 17553 is yet to be seen, but that was the intent of putting it in this way.
okay, so
Check on that.
as long as, when we come ahead
Confirm Sorry.
with this for a public hearing, let's make sure that that definition, that work on the definition is done.
Let me work on this, and at the next workshop, I'll come back with that definition.
Oh, okay, all right,
However,
that's great, thank
C.
you.
Bulk storage of salts and the materials containing commonly used for snow and ice removal.
Where are you now?
Yeah, I'm on C. Shall not be exposed to
contractor's
precipitation.
yard, C. Contractor's yard, light or heavy, C.
So does that mean somebody can just throw a tarp over it? Or is it underneath of a building?
and shall be stored on a permanent
According to
impermeable
DES, it
surface
either needs to be under a
to
permanent roof or a
prevent
cover.
ground infiltration. Yeah. So, I mean, that's,
I think you got protection there.
Yeah.
And if we throw back in paragraph D, it forces them to be specifically in compliance with state regs, then they're at least on notice that they have to be.
I have one more question. Just go a little bit farther up there to D again, the storage of volatile fuels. A little farther over to where it says signs and such. Why is there stuff about signage here under storage?
That's the way it's currently written. My recommendation is to remove signs and let the signs chapter deal for itself.
I agree, agreed.
Be careful, because we're talking about where the signs can be placed, not the sizes of the signs only.
That can still happen in the sign section.
Yeah, but are you going to specify in your sign section that if you have a fuel storage dispensing unit, that the sign has to be in a particular spot on that island? Are we going to be able to remember to put that in our signage
I understand what you're
ordinance?
saying.
I think you'll be able to deal with it under either the special exception or the site plan review and put a condition on
Yeah.
that signage located on the pump or the cover thereof should be limited to.
Who's going to write that now so that it isn't forgotten in a day or two?
That would just be a
It doesn't
condition.
currently exist in site plan review regs. It doesn't exist in our signage regs. It exists here only. If we want to have that kind of protection, let's not take it out until we make sure that we put it in where we would like it to be better. You know what I'm trying to say?
I understand what you're trying to say, but I don't think it belongs here.
Well, maybe, that may be fine, so we take it out, but let's not take it out until we know where we're supposed to put it.
yeah, right, yeah.
I think it should be in signs with everybody else's signs.
Well, then, are you writing the sign ordinance? 'Cause
Not
if
today.
Well, then that's the problem. If we take it out
We
now.
don't want to take it out of here
we're left
until
with
we
nothing.
put it in someplace
Yeah.
else.
So what we do is we put it in the other place first, then we come back in 2 years and take it out?
That's correct.
No, what we'll do is this is a work in progress, right? We've got housing to redo and AOB to redo. So this is another little piece to redo. We're doing the signage now. So we want to specify in signage when that issue comes up, make sure we have a place to put signs on fuel dispensing islands. When we've done that, then this will be part of the piece to be taken out.
Okay,
I just don't want, my concern, Julie, is only that it,
we'll lose it.
if we lose it.
Right.
I have a question about G, as hospitals for treatment of human beings. Would clinics be appropriate there, hospitals and clinics? I mean, I really don't think there's going to be a new hospital in Wolfeboro. But at the same time, we might want to have doctors' offices or clinics.
Offices are already allowed.
Yeah, they're allowed already.
But is a medical hospital clinic like what they have in Tamworth or one of those, is that considered?
It's conceivable that somebody
Medical
would
thing?
open a Quest Diagnostics or something. I think as the practitioner, we'd say, okay, that's hospital-esque. It's an office, really, but it has quasi-medical things happening in it.
And that would be covered, is what you're saying, under the hospital bit?
Well, yes, because it's not just an office, it's providing a medical service, which is not what I would call 17596H as modified tonight. So it would then evoke the special exception for neighborhood impacts, if you will, for having a clinic-esque structure there.
Do we define hospital?
That's a very good question. I was actually just looking up pump islands because in D, we have a reference confined to the pump island that is not defined.
But is this specifically allowed in this district, or is this something which is
What, hospital?
the clinics
Hospitals are clinics.
by definition?
Well, that's why he's
Let me
looking
look.
at hospital.
Okay, there is a definition for hospitals.
It's an institution providing health services primarily for inpatients and medical surgical care of the sick or injured, including as an integral part of the institution, such related facilities as laboratories, outpatient departments, training facilities, central service facilities, and staff offices. So yes, a clinic is
But would that,
captured under-
would that allow an urgent care facility to be there?
No, it wouldn't.
Why not?
Not as a hospital.
Not a hospital because it doesn't have inpatient services.
Thank you.
It has,
No, primarily for inpatients.
Well, there you were. You'd have to stick it under, you'd have to tell them you go in as an office, because his offices will include medical offices, and that's basically what he's doing. He's got an office in there, and he sees outpatients. Nobody stays overnight.
Do we have a definition for outpatient?
No, but we don't need one. You have a definition for office. A place where people conduct their business, you would allow it in there as an office.
So you can get your teeth cleaned, you could donate plasma under the office.
You can get get a COVID shot,
Okay, I
can't stay
think,
overnight.
I think the hospital for the treatment of human beings is here because we deleted kennels and we wanted to make sure,
For veterinarians, yeah.
right? Okay,
Although arguably, this would be a better zone for veterinary offices than,
Yes, it would be.
well, we took it out, so, in 2020. So if you want to put it back in, go for it,
Veterinary
I
offices?
guess.
No,
Was
not
taken
on
out?
another warrant article.
Right. Remember,
Gonna be
this
a
has
big-
to go for a public hearing, so
It's going to be a big enough
some of
warrant
these
as it is.
things sort of went in and came out because of public input.
Okay.
So we have to go through that, too.
Motion to close the issue on this one, instruct Tavis to get busy on it, and then move on to the next
Okay,
one on the
all
agenda.
right, that's a motion.
Is,
Okay, I'll
Seconded.
second it. Oh, you second it,
May I
okay.
make a request? Can we have it all in black next time? I thought we'd moved past that.
no, the reason for doing the red is it makes it then very easy to get ready for the public hearing, so the public can see what it says and what it's going to say, and then it's ready for the warrant, and
and for us to track the
I
change.
can print it in black and white if you'd like.
It's confusing and distracting, that's all.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded to move on and let Tavis do the
Magic.
return to us in a next meeting. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, Brad, you can come on back now.
Isn't that fun?
Okay. End of there.
So the restaurant definition memo that you have, board discussion at the last meeting was to not leave discussion of drive-through as final without making some revisions, and I had proposed revisiting the current definitions that are in. So I just recommend going to the second page of the memo, where it includes the modified definition of restaurant, again with the red text being the change, striking restaurant, comma, carryout in its entirety and replacing it with restaurant, comma, drive-through. And simple enough, by removing restaurant carryout, anyone that was originally permitted as a carryout restaurant remains illegal existing, both as restaurant carryout or by the new definition of restaurant. But what it does is then pose a new use, which is restaurant, comma, drive-through, which is not permitted in any zone.
Okay, the reason that we're discussing this is because of the drive-through issue. And I think it would be a mistake to put a definition for restaurant drive-through. I think it should stay the way it is, where it says it's prohibited.
Why do you feel that it should not be its own separate, if we're prohibiting it,
What?
why do you feel it should not be its own separate definition?
Because I think that it's, people are going to see it and they're going to say, okay, you know, I thought we finished this, and now it's come up again. And
But
so
I think it does
just
need a
think it's-
definition.
I'm just, if I could just express my opinion, that would be okay. But I think it's just sending the wrong message to people who took the survey, came to the hearing, and have expressed their thoughts about this.
Madam Chairwoman, I respectfully disagree with that. I got the impression from the people who came here and the people who wrote comments on the SurveyMonkey that they wanted this board to be absolutely sure that there was a guaranteed strong prohibition on drive-through restaurants. And I think that they understood that including a prohibition in the definition section of the ordinance wasn't strong enough. And I heard people say that we needed to include something in zoning where the definition specifically stated this kind of restaurant is just not allowed. And I personally...
Well, it does say that now.
It says it as an afterthought in a single sentence added on to the end of a definition of a restaurant, which to me is an afterthought. And we had a discussion about this, and that is contestable. If we have a definition specifically of a drive-through restaurant saying that this is just not allowed, and this is what we mean by drive-through restaurant, we have a stronger protection.
Okay, but what is being proposed is a definition with no other place in the zoning ordinance saying that it's prohibited or anything. Now, in other zoning ordinances that I'm familiar with, there are prohibited uses. If we had that, then that would be good. But we don't have it, and so that's where my concern is.
We have permissive zoning where you get to do what you're allowed to do. Right. If it doesn't say you can, then you can't. And nowhere in our ordinances does it say restaurant drive-throughs are permitted. So you can't do them. And all we're doing here is defining what exactly a drive-through restaurant really means.
Okay, I would be more comfortable if there was a prohibited use, but...
Is it possible to add that? Is it possible to add prohibited use?
Then you don't have permissive zoning anymore, and then you have to go through all of your zoning regs and specifically prohibit the uses that you don't want people to exercise, because if it isn't specifically prohibited, it is by implication permitted. That's the problem. If you have permissive zoning, what you don't say you can do, you can't do.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
I'm not trying to educate you. You know more than I do about this sort of stuff. I'm just speaking. But in this case, what we have in our ordinance is drive-through restaurants are not allowed, but we don't define what a drive-through restaurant is. And here we have a definition of what a drive-through restaurant is.
So another way of achieving this would be to leave restaurant as written, leave restaurant carryout as written, and add restaurant drive-through as proposed.
That's a good compromise.
However, it is very simple. Sometimes I wish not everything had to be done in public session. But if one were to demonstrate a proposed restaurant and be able to demonstrate to the board that they are opening an establishment open to the general public where food and beverage are prepared, served, and consumed primarily within the principal building, but not entirely, they are still a restaurant and therefore not precluded from having a drive-through the way the definitions read right now. Right now, it's reasonable for two people coming at the same two definitions cold would see very clearly that a carry-out restaurant cannot have a drive-through, which almost seems backwards when a carry-out restaurant is a commercial establishment open to the general public, which by design of the physical facilities or by service or packaging procedures permits or encourages the purchase of prepared ready-to-eat foods intended to be consumed either on or off the premise. Restaurant drive-thrus are prohibited. So if you pull in and park and somebody walks food out to you and you back out and leave, that's fine, because technically it's not a drive-through. But you're still driving in and picking up prepackaged food. So functionally you have a drive-through, but what you don't have is the order microphone and speaker and the window display and the order
That's what
board
every-
and the pickup window.
That's what everybody did not want to have.
Correct. But you're,
Your suggestion, Kathy, Tavis suggested keep the definition of restaurant that we have currently, keep the definition of restaurant carryout that we have currently, and then simply add in a new definition, restaurant drive-through.
I would also
That
suggest
way you
adding
keep-
restaurant drive-throughs are prohibited to restaurant.
Well, that way you have the people that you're concerned about who thought it was all done will still feel like it's all done because that definition's still there. And then all you're doing in addition is defining what a restaurant drive-through really means. And the definition clearly shows that it's everybody's idea of a Mickey D's or a Wendy's.
Okay, all right.
So if we don't do that, would somebody be able to still drop a petition to have a drive-through restaurant?
Yes.
Somebody could write a petition every year.
Yes, they could.
Till the end of time, yes. Now, the other concern I have is that
They would have to.
if not because of COVID, many restaurants are operating under the restaurant carryout
Right,
mode right now, and it's only, current carryout restaurants are only allowed in very specific zones right now, where arguably every restaurant in town is currently functioning as a carryout restaurant. So that's why, that was part of the impetus behind
Get rid of it.
getting rid of it, because I haven't heard any public concern expressed over being able to park, run inside, grab the food that you ordered, and leave.
Well, that may change once the pandemic is gone.
I
Go
don't see
back to the
anybody
old
giving
ways?
up their takeaway.
And if it
may, but-
doesn't change and there seems to be a need to do something about it, then maybe we can revisit it. But if it's not bothering anybody currently, even if it's technically not
yeah.
allowed,
Do you remember which zones it's specific? I think it may be the Center Street.
I believe it is.
Yeah,
Any
right.
restaurant downtown cannot be carryout,
yeah.
yet are.
Yeah, yes.
They all are, yes.
I mean, the way it's currently defined, there's an ice cream shop operating in violation, there's a donut shop arguing, but we don't have separate breakouts for ice cream shops and bakeries and baked goods stores and other. But the diner, you can call and get food to go. That's carryout, that's not a restaurant. Nolan's, you can call and order a pizza, and that's carryout.
It's also a restaurant, though.
Right, but they're in violation.
But it's a restaurant carryout.
It's both.
It's both.
And so I
The
think,
regulations, I'm just saying, that is why my recommendation initially was just to mush, if you will, carryout and restaurant
I
together.
agree.
Because we really don't care how people are leaving a restaurant with their food, provided they're not driving up to a window, ordering, and leaving with it.
Understood, but we do have to respect the point Kathy made, that there are people who will feel that if that is removed, that we have somehow caved to the commercial interests that want to put these things in, regardless of what we say about drive-through.
To be candid, people are generally unaware of how to read a zoning ordinance.
And I think that your suggestion, I would propose to the board, your suggestion was a good one. Leave definition of restaurant carryout, restaurant carryout and restaurant drive-through in as proposed, and make the changes to the definition of restaurant that you proposed. We have basically 3 definitions now. We have restaurant carryout, and restaurant drive-through.
Do you want to
Yeah,
add
couldn't
restaurant
it
drive-throughs
just-
are prohibited to the
Couldn't
end
you
of
just
restaurant?
say restaurant and restaurant carryout? Same, I mean,
Then you don't have the definition of restaurant drive-through anymore.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
the way you have it right now in the ordinance, it simply says drive-throughs are prohibited, but it doesn't say what a drive-through is, and some of these that we have now, I mean, could be conceived as a drive-through, They sort of drive up to them and you drive past them.
So to that end, going to the second page, if you were simply to take restaurant, a commercial establishment open to the general public where food and beverage are prepared, served, and consumed primarily within the principal building, but which may, by service or packaging procedures, permit or encourage the purchase of prepared, ready-to-eat foods intended to be consumed either on or off premises, period. Restaurant drive-throughs are prohibited.
Correct.
Fine, does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's
right.
fine.
Okay.
Tavis.
6 ways to split a hair in zoning.
Right.
We found
And I'm going to
7 or 8
ask
of
one
them.
more question. All these people that are doing carryout now that are in violation, are they going to continue to be in violation, or is it going to be just some sloughing off and they're just going to be
Well,
okay with it?
they're not really in violation now because the town generally agreed to extend the COVID protocol or COVID isms through the winter season because it shut off right in the middle of people ramping up for that. That's why the outdoor seating is still a thing. And by the time were this to be voted in, as discussed tonight, everyone would just be able to continue as their marketing plan wanted.
Now, but come March, is that carryout one going to stay there then?
So if we go to the second page,
Yeah.
where I combined restaurant and carryout, and this gets adopted, they are all fine and not in violation. Any restaurant could
will
do
be.
carryout,
Okay. That was my
but
concern.
no restaurant could have a drive-through.
Correct.
I have a question. You end up having some of the markets serving food or allowed takeout. Is that something that we need to worry about, or is that they're not a restaurant?
We don't have it. What's that?
I don't think it's an issue,
I don't think it's an issue.
because
Now,
they
if-
don't have
if some-
seating inside, so they are not a restaurant.
If somebody wanted to do a new one, it might become an issue, but that's true today or tomorrow with this change. Because,
Whole
you know,
Foods
if you look back to the discussion we had,
Yeah,
Sit
sit
and
down, I
eat, yeah.
know. Spend a lot of money.
Yeah, right.
I'm not a cheap to go there.
No, I
I'm not
know.
worried. If no one else is worried, I'm happy.
You want a motion to
I'm not
move
worried.
on?
Yeah,
I think frankly, the majority of zones have something akin to the 17596H discussion on retail stores and shops.
Okay.
Good
so-
enough.
You
So that's
walk
all-
out with prepared food and you bought it in the shop and it's fine.
Yes. I do not want TV World to come knock down my door tomorrow because I said the bubble was illegal.
And
That's
Harvest
not what I'm-
Market has prepared food, geez, that'd be horrible.
Well, see, Harvest Market is easy because that's a store that has an accessory component. Yes.
Okay, so we're pretty well set with this
I
one.
think we've duly beaten it, Madam Chair.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Okay. All right, now on to Housing Opportunity Zone discussion.
So
Do we want to vote on that, or?
Well,
okay, we moved it.
everything with or without a vote is going to come back in a refined version at the
right.
subsequent meeting for moving forward.
Good.
I did put together a memo on the housing option zones or housing opportunity zones, and I tried to put it together in a way that broke out the key pieces and then rebuilt the whole thing. And I know at least one of you wrote back saying, this is very hard to decipher.
You just made it more difficult for everyone to understand
Yes.
what the change in the law was. If
So I will defer.
the state legislature, Senate and House, June 24 of this year, new bill amended RSA 79E, the one you may be familiar with, which allows tax abatement for fixing up an old barn. New paragraph created something called a housing opportunity zone. Housing opportunity zone simply says this: town decides where in its area it wants to say housing opportunity zones can exist. It does that by a vote of the people at town meeting. Once that vote is taken, And what that allows is for the selectmen to allow a property tax abatement for a term of 10 years to a developer who wants to come into that housing opportunity zone and put up affordable housing under certain requirements, 80% or less of the median income, and I think it's 1/3, minimum of 1/3 of the units to be for people making less than 80% of the area median income. And then they get a tax abatement, whatever the selectmen decide the abatement is to be, for a term of 10 years. That's to encourage the development of affordable housing. So if that's something that the planning board is interested in considering, the steps I would suggest are, 1, look at our area and decide where we think housing opportunity zones are appropriate to be placed, kind of like a zoning overlay district. 2, figure out how to write the warrant article, and we need council's help so that it can be legal. Revise our own housing ordinances to allow for housing opportunity zones, and 4, get it onto the 2022 warrant. Town passes it, then it'll be up to the selectmen to decide how much of a tax abatement they want to allow. Once that's all in place, that's an incentive to a developer to come into Wolfeboro, put in affordable housing, because there's a tax abatement for 10 years or so, however the selectmen want it to last, which we don't currently have. And since this is brand new, we could be the first out of the gate. Every other town will be looking at this. Every other town who wants affordable housing, looking at the same allowance, and will be doing exactly what we're doing, crafting ordinances to get them on the warrant as soon as possible, to get Mr. Developer with interest in building something like this to look at their town as opposed to somebody else's town.
One thing to keep in mind with this is even with the housing opportunity zone, the current density limitations would exist.
Well, that's why you're going to revise the housing ordinances.
Well, yes. Before doing that, my recommendation is the board think about what zones this should apply to or could apply to.
That's something we should think about tonight.
And my recommendation would be townwide minus the shorefront residential district.
I'd second that. Julie, you have a question?
This sounds to me like we're deciding who lives in the slums.
I'm sorry?
This sounds to me like we're going to decide who lives in the slums,
Who lives
so
in the
that those
slums?
people can lose their houses to somebody that has more dollars that can be rebuilt.
I'm sorry?
That's what this sounded like to me. That we're going to go, oh, your space right there, we're going to let the developer come in and redevelop that. So you have to leave, which is what's happening right now anyway.
No, I don't.
That's what it sounded like to me when this whole thing was,
Then
when I
maybe
read it and you read it too.
I must have misdescribed it. Maybe I should try again.
Because we're going to figure out where in town needs redeveloping because it's not up to snuff, and let this guy over here come in with a lot of money and redevelop that space.
Okay,
Isn't that what it says?
The idea,
I would think of it a much different way. Right now, there are multiple boards that are identifying that the town does not have any workforce housing or affordable housing.
Correct. A lot of this just got bought up by people doing that same thing.
all that this allows is for the planning board to designate what zoning districts in town we would like to see housing opportunity zones declared in.
Or what areas of town should be provided an incentive to go after the much-needed workforce housing in town. The actual incentive is the 10 years of tax relief that the selectmen can contemplate. And that could be broken out on the total number of units, those that are going, it's at least a third of the units. If somebody came in with 100% of the units, that might have a different tax incentive than somebody meeting the
It's
bare
not-
minimum.
It's not telling anybody you have to give up your home because we're going to put
So
in the
this
slum
isn't to
now.
redevelop only buildings that are existing.
No, it's nothing to
That's
do
what it
with,
sounds like to me. And
it's nothing to
like,
do with redevelopment. It's got everything to do with new construction.
It's incentivizing the need. It's incentivizing the ability to build to satisfy the need. Right now, 79E allows for economic revitalization, and there are specific credits if you, say, want to revitalize the Avery Block building. So if it were currently a large vacant building, most people today would want to come in, raise that structure,
Here's,
build a new building, and 79E says, wait, we want to protect this resource that we have in the town, and if you put in these units, we can ratchet up the tax incentive to preserve that building. This is going the next step to say, we know you could build a house anywhere, but we're going to provide this added incentive to build workforce.
maybe this will help you, Julie. In the information that we got in our packets was confusing, and it was misleading. Here is 79E as written by the state. This is what's law now. In a city or town that's adopted this RSA, qualifying structure means a housing unit or units constructed in a housing opportunity zone. New construction. Not tear down, not recondition an old building, not move out, I want it, now it's mine. It's, I can afford to buy this 35 acres of land. This is where I want to put up my housing, affordable housing units. I get a tax break because I'm going into a housing opportunity zone.
Whole different feeling than what I got from the rest of it.
Exactly, because what you got was
You know, the new
more
construction. on
complicated
the-
than it needed
Yeah.
to be. And
Yeah,
what-
because that's what we're seeing now is we've got some big dollars coming in, buying up all the little houses. And we've got single moms with children trying to find places to stay for 9 months at this point.
Well, think of, in my mind, think of Harriman Hill. An opportunity for one more, 2, 3, 4 more Harriman Hill type areas in parts of the town that we designate where somebody feels he can put it up and make a buck off it.
So it is new construction only.
It's new construction. It can also be in a reconditioned building. It could be an old barn turned into housing units.
One without current residents,
I'm sorry?
one without current residents.
Or with current residents if the guy buys it and can persuade them to move out.
A Lanier Street duplex going to 4 units.
Yeah.
But not requiring people to leave if the owner decides to sell it. I think that's Julie's concern.
Oh, no, they have to agree, and there's legally binding documents that say that there's an agreement, and it has to be double-checked, and records have to go to the state and the town annually to make sure that they're satisfying the requirements.
The only thing is,
it's
if you've
the-
got a lease, you know, your lease is good for X amount of days. And if you have a new landlord is waiting for that lease to be done, they're not going to renew.
No,
They
but
say,
the
"Oh,
landlord
you're
can
out."
only put in a qualifying tenant for the 10 years.
You're saying after it's built? No, I was saying before, what you were saying. Before.
It's not changing the market forces
No.
whatsoever. This does not change what exists now.
Right.
If that landlord thinks he can make more money by kicking you out
Mm-hmm.
and getting someone in for another $50 a month, there's nothing to stop him from doing that. He'll just do that when your lease is up. Having
However,
a housing
Doing that now.
opportunity zone doesn't mean that he's going to want to get you out even sooner, or there's even more money to be made for it, because once he gets you out, that whole building has to be reconditioned, and then 1/3 of every unit in that building he'll lose money on because it has to be rented to somebody who makes less than 80% of the median income. So there's no real no monetary incentive for him to turf people out and then move in a whole bunch of other people, because a whole bunch of other people he's moving in may be making less than the people he's moving out.
and typically, you know, under a traditional 79E, the selectmen are not looking at compensating the developer for the difference in revenue. I could rent it for $1,500, now I have to rent it for $1,100. That's not what the incentive is for. The incentive is usually for the reinvestment cost in that structure to provide the service.
So the question comes, will you prefer a larger tract of land on the outskirts of town where there's no water and sewer, where a developer can take a larger tract and you can create a density area, or are you trying to force it into the water and sewer residential zone? I think that becomes the big question. I would rather see it end up in a larger tract where it's spread out from the town and there's more room to grow.
But
Tavis
doesn't that
is-
defeat this, doesn't that defeat the whole zoning bit?
Well, Tavis's suggestion is to create a housing opportunity zone overlay district.
The only question there is whether or not you've got minimum lot size and frontage requirements.
Well, if first of all, you make your housing overlays, opportunity zone overlay district correspond to the entire town except for shorefront residential. Now it can go into the outlying areas where you can get your 35 acres, or it could go in downtown if he can find his half acre. But at the same time, Tavis redesigns our housing ordinances. We have 3 of them, and they haven't been looked at for like 15 years, so they're out of date. They got to be redesigned anyway, so that we can have higher density where there is water and sewer on smaller lot sizes.
It's if you think about it, I mean, if you take Julie's example of the slum creation, then yes, generally people would say, well, that needs to be out in the middle of nowhere, unless you're the people that live in the middle of nowhere, and now, wait a minute, I was in the middle of nowhere, and I'm surrounded by this density. You and Brad, perhaps more than anyone else on the board, understand once you put in, so you put in a development that has 50 residents in it, well, now you're into a community water supply, community septic, and pretty soon, even though the selectmen may pose an incentive, it's not going to offset that cost. But at the same time, we don't have any mechanism right now for someone to take a 2-unit building on water and sewer, make some minor updates, turn it into a 4-unit building, and have affordable housing. Yes, functionally speaking, it makes the most sense to do it where there is water and sewer. I've spoken to Dave Ford. He's given me some rough numbers on the additional sewer capacity. At this point, we could increase density and not have a major impact on the sewer system. I also asked about water, and he said water is never going to be a problem. So someone might decide to do it out on a large tract of land. I don't really think, my concern was saying only on the outskirts of town or in the rural residential areas, as those were specifically zoned to be rural, where the houses are far apart on large tracts of land. If you start putting in, I don't want to say housing projects, but redevelopment projects, it's going to be out of character for the remainder of the zone.
Right. Harriman Hill is on town water and sewer.
Yes.
Yeah. But if you get, 50 houses out on the end of 28, there was that whole bit of why we did the zoning over the way it is with the density really downtown and getting less as it goes out because of services. If you want a fireman to show up, and you live way the freak out there, that's your own fault.
Well, remember, by the same token, if you're living at 80% of the median, how many extra cars do you have? Do you have a car?
You have a car.
So if the housing opportunity zone is out there, the town isn't just going to, out of the blue, come up with public transportation or sidewalks or bike trails or what have you. So really bringing the density into where the density is allowed makes sense.
No developer is going to be thinking of putting a Harriman Hill type of unit out where the Alzheimer's unit was going to be. They had found the water supply, knowing that the people to move into that affordable unit would not have the ability to get downtown to the jobs that they'd be working at. So, allow market forces to make
So-
those sorts of decisions.
I have a question. The units that are behind Paul Zimmerman's vacant lot, is that affordable housing?
No,
Oh, no.
no,
Nope.
Those are just
market rate.
market rate?
Market rate.
Okay. So I'm just my opinion, but I feel like if they were attractively built, his lot would be a perfect opportunity for this. That lot has been sitting there doing nothing for decades. This would be a perfect opportunity for that, if well done.
And remember as well, to build on what Susan's saying, they still have to go through site plan review regulations. They still have to meet architectural guidelines. They still have to meet all of the code requirements that we have. It's not as if someone's going to come in and build a 50-story project, stuff it full of.
And remember, this level of affordable is not capital A affordable. This is not the dreaded Section 8. And no, I'm not opposed to Section 8, but it's not subsidized housing. This is people that,
Hardworking people who currently can't afford to live in Wolfeboro.
technically, I'm workforce housing.
Right.
I don't make enough for workforce housing. I don't make enough for that cutoff.
I do think that we could promote this in the larger tracts of land. If we're talking about affordable housing, they're going to be subsidized. So why can't the houses go on a larger tract of land?
It's not subsidized.
It's not subsidized.
Well, it is subsidized because it's a tax abatement.
This is tax relief to incentivize workforce housing, which the master plan in the town has identified as a need. And no one is doing, because right now it's easier to build a giant house at market rate.
Yeah, but people want to live in houses. They don't want to live in apartments. I'm sorry. They want to have a small house and a little area where their kids can run around, and running around in the center of town isn't always the best fit. I think it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
But I think that we need to, I think it'd be wise if we left those sorts of decisions. All we're here to do is to make it, to allow the incentive to exist by declaring housing opportunity zone, and then let the developer and let the market decide whether or not this kind of building structure is appropriate for downtown. And does mommy want to let her kid play on the sidewalk, or would she rather have a place out in the fields? You know, I don't think we need to micromanage so much. All that this allows us to do is to provide a developer with an incentive, assuming the selectmen go along with it, an incentive for 10 years to put up a structure to house people that we desperately need to have living here in town.
I think what you're talking about, again, is more like what Julie said, that she didn't feel that was very favorable. And again,
Oh, John, what I was not favorable about is people coming in and buying up the houses, knocking them down, and putting up big things.
I mean,
That's what I don't want.
Case in point, Genesis Healthcare, they have 120 workers on staff. 3 of them can afford to live in Wolfeboro. But they provide services to people who are here in Wolfeboro, one way or another, but they can't afford to live here. And what I would like to see is, and this housing opportunity zone measure kind of helps that, opportunities for people, single people, people with children, to be able to afford to live in town where they can get a rent that they can afford. And it's not necessarily going to be a small house. Maybe the days of small houses are done. Look at the average house price in Wolfeboro now. But why they can't afford to live there.
Somebody could propose a project under this as a series of small houses.
That would be nice. 2-bedroom condos are nice. I lived in those a lot,
Planning board
too.
just approved one.
yeah, but you have to have some, again, we want this to be tasteful at the same time.
Well, you have your architectural standards there that provide, and site plan review as well. I mean, I don't think, perhaps, I don't know, perhaps the days of recreating the picturesque New England village on the 30-acre lot down the road are over, because prices for land and prices for houses are just out of the reach of the ordinary guy.
Well, and frankly, every zone right now, literally every zone right now, precludes exactly what you're afraid of. I had a developer call up with a lot not far from here with a site plan that I think this board would have fallen over itself to approve, to put 24 townhouses on a half-acre lot. He has a half-acre lot, the zoning allows him 3 units. And the question was, well, Tavis, explain to me how the planning board expects anyone to do affordable housing when the density limit is so low. You cannot possibly do workforce housing with the density limits the town has in place. So you're telling me to do it and not do it all with the same book. So this is one mechanism to allow workforce in. The board would still have to go through and figure out what density to allow units per acre.
But that's a separate issue.
It is. But what I'm saying is even if town meeting were tonight and the town approved housing opportunity zone townwide minus shorefront or townwide, no one could do it.
Right. This just allows an incentive to exist. That's all that it does. It doesn't say what kind of buildings are going in or where they're going in or how many they're going in. It just says that if you want to do it, you can get a property tax abatement for X number of years from the selectmen because we have this in place. That's all that this does. Nothing else.
I think you're going to get people that say they're going to be the nibbies, and they're not going to want it in the center of the town in a certain location, and they possibly could say, you're reducing the value of my house.
Of course they're going to. They
It'll
did
be
that
interesting.
when
It'll be
Harriman.
interesting.
That's specifically the
That's
the
why I
lot.
said we should be crafty and give them an outlying zone where they can have nice small houses or even tiny house setups.
But we're not, this does not define what kind of place gets built. This just says, if you want to do it, we can give you a property tax break. That's all it says. And remember when Harriman Hill came up, what they said about Harriman Hill and what kind of people were going to be coming into town, and isn't it going to be awful and we shouldn't ever allow it, and now it's one of the best things that we've got in town for workforce housing. So, people are going to say NIMBY, 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 but that's fine.
To your point, John, that's specifically the only basis for not including shorefront in my recommendation. Because I think if the board proposed housing opportunity zones in the shorefront, there would be a lot of opposition, specifically for shorefront, if not for the rest of, the baby in the bathwater.
It would be absurd to propose them in the shorefront anyway, because who's going to put up affordable housing in the shorefront?
Right.
And if you spread,
Well, yeah, although ironically, you'd still have to do site plan review, which is something largely absent from all of the shorefront development right now.
if you look at it this way, if you spread the pain throughout the entire town, as opposed to just leave out shorefront, where they live, and put in, say, the whole town is going to be a housing opportunity zone, everyone is going to have it in their backyard. So we spread the pain around. Rather than
Then we might
single out
not
a
end up with
particular
just big
Everyone would
units
have the
either. We might end up with
opportunity.
just a unit here and a duplex there and a quad here, and I like that better. That's neighborhood, instead of just one great big huge 24-plex.
Well, you're not the developer, so it's up
No,
to him.
but I'm
what
saying
he-
if there's only a space here that they can have, and there's only a space here and only a space here, then that's your opportunity, guys. Make good,
That's,
you know?
it'll be exactly what he figures he can make a buck off of.
Right. And that's kind of the neighborhoods like what we have. A little bit of this and a little bit of that, and a little bit of that.
Right.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know?
Grew up,
Not just all, those are the blue units and those are the green units.
grew up organically over time.
Right.
That's what, these things will grow up organically over time too. But they're not going to do anything. They'll all go to Farmington, or they'll all move up to Tamworth or over to Ossipee if they put an HOZ initiative onto the ballot and get it passed. And they won't come here because we won't have this opportunity for them. All this is an incentive to attract somebody. Then they go through the process. Then they go through the process.
Yeah, I think that's key, too, is the fact that wherever this gets put, if it does get put in somewhere, every one of these developments will be coming here for the site plan review, which will go through all the hoops and everything, have to meet all our regulations and stuff. So you'll get to see and have input on everything, and so won't the neighbors. All the abutters and everybody will have an opportunity to, voice their concerns if there are any and stuff like that. And also keep in mind too, the selectmen there's no guarantees either on the tax abatements and stuff. Each one has to apply individually, like we do with the barn preservation regulations now. And we determine what percentage we give out for the 10-year period. And we set certain goals they have to meet for the barn part of it, what they have to do for restoration, maintenance, things like that. So if they don't live up to their expectations, it could become null and void also. So then it goes right back to full taxation on it, so.
But you'd end up with a facility building with higher density that's now turned into something that the previous owner wouldn't be able to do. Because you were only allowed 3 units on a half-acre lot, and now you've allowed a zone to be created where you've put multiple units on that half-acre lot, and you've then you go back on your process. Then what do you end up with?
You end up with affordable housing.
You end up with affordable housing. The people that have come to me and asked about putting in affordable housing very quickly went to the density and they've walked away because Wolfeboro provides no opportunity or incentive. That's why because remember, when you put in the elderly and the affordable and the workforce housing sections, the state said you were to encourage it. It wasn't just an added incentive. So the town, Wolfeboro, put it in as various inclusionary zones. No one bid at the apple. The state's realizing that many towns put it in under the statute and no one bid at the apple. In New Hampshire, Wolfeboro is continuing to go down a path where all the land is getting eaten up and there's no solution to workforce housing. So the state said, okay, let's ratchet this up. Now we'll give the towns the opportunity to identify areas and the selectmen then, by extension, the ability to provide financial incentives to do this. So now people are getting coupons, if you will, to try and get some workforce housing in because New Hampshire categorically is getting overrun by very wealthy people, which is not a bad thing unless you're the support staff trying to support
Right, there are no workers.
those with more means.
So what you're saying is each individual, okay, so here's the overlay. So here's the lot. This guy wants to do the thing here. So first he has to go see Brad at the selectman's office, or first he has to come and see if it's buildable? And go through the process with the planning board first?
It would need to be
and then
worked.
go to the selectman?
I think they could probably go concurrently. So select board get an application with the understanding that the applicant is in front of the planning board for a 55-unit complex. The selectman could then grant X amount of tax relief for X number of years under certain parameters, providing the planning board signs off.
And that may not be enough for him from the selectmen. Maybe he wants 7% and they offer him 6%. And he says, I can't build it, and everyone stands firm, and he goes somewhere else.
So where it becomes tricky is if somebody comes in, let's just say 100 units, planning board goes through your process and you find out, really looks like the site can only handle 90. Well, the selectmen are offering this. Planning board says, I'm only going to get 90 out of this. That doesn't work anymore. There goes affordable.
So what happens when your neighbors come in and they voice concerns? They don't have a chance to deny this application because of their concerns, only unless this criteria that isn't favorable.
Well, they never have the right to cancel the process because they're concerned. They have the right to suggest the process get canceled if it's in violation of zoning. But if it meets all zoning requirements, then it goes through. I mean, it's the same arguments were made against Harriman Hill development when that went in. There's tremendous arguing about that, John.
I look at Harriman Hill as a good setup. That's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a tract of land that's in amongst $300,000-$400,000 houses that you just plop something right in the middle of it, and
You really think that if it's in the middle, if it's a tract of $300,000 or $400,000 houses,
If it's
that they're going to put in
close to the amenities, there's a good chance that it could
affordable
happen.
housing?
Yes, I believe it could
It would
happen.
not be economically feasible for the guy who owns a couple of acres.
Our sewer and
down
water doesn't
housing.
go out that far.
What do you, I'm sorry?
Our water and sewer doesn't go out that far. It stays in this area, and that's what I'm talking about. You're talking about $300,000 or $400,000 houses with that opportunity happening right there.
And if there's-
You're not looking outside the area.
But
If you wanted
you're-
to look at Harriman Hill and go out past Harriman Hill and extend water and sewer, I think that would be the right approach. But I think squeezing it in where it is right now, it's
What we're thinking, what I'm proposing, and I think Tavis is proposing, is to make a housing opportunity zone overlay district that covers the entire town except for the shorefront residential. Meaning that if District A allows affordable housing, District A will be in a housing opportunity zone, which will allow the developer tax abatement if the selectmen go for it. If he wants to put it into District B has not got an allowance for affordable housing or for higher density, then he can't do it there. He's got to find someplace else to do it.
So the majority of the zoning districts right now only allow single-family detached units.
Right.
Therefore, overlay or not, you can only build a single-family home, therefore this cannot happen.
But you're not making sense, because again, if you don't expand your water and sewer, then you can't build it.
Yes, you can. You can build, if you can find water source and get an approved septic, they could put the Alzheimer's facility in. That was hundreds of beds. And that got state approval. It failed on not availability of water, because it only had 2 of the 3 required aquifers. But there are other spots in town where they might have been able to find water, and they had an approved septic that could have gone through.
So the right thing to do would be to extend the water and sewer out so that that area could be used for that.
Well, if you can find an extra $15–20 million to run the pipes out there, that'd be
Well,
great.
if the town wants to create workforce housing, they got to step up to the plate.
No, John.
The proposal which is here and is really a reaction to the new state law. And it is basically putting a zone or putting the idea that we can do this. And so in some ways, the particulars, the innuendos or whatever are unrelated to the proposal which we have here.
Correct.
And so I think we should move on this, and, you know, who gets in what zone is something that we deal with later.
Yeah, the hard work is yet to come.
And we're dealing with a state law which we have to react to. And there's basically no option for us as a planning board. But we just need to say, yes, we can do this, and we need to move forward.
If we want to keep Wolfeboro competitive with other New Hampshire towns and attract affordable housing,
I'm not
would be
saying I'm
crazy not
against,
to
I'm not
adopt
saying I'm
this.
against it. I'm just saying the approach that we're looking at doesn't include the rest of the puzzle.
well, of course not, because this is the first step.
Okay, as long as you can consider it.
I would make a motion that planning board request planner to obtain from council draft language adopting RSA 79E4C be included on the 2022 warrant, so we could then discuss it at a future work session, thrash it out further, everyone get comfortable with what we would actually be allowing.
You're saying adopting it now and then picking out the zone afterwards?
That would be part of the discussion. I would like to get language from council, what we should actually say, how we do it. You know, the town hereby adopts blah, blah, blah.
But I'm saying we can pick the zone later.
Then we have to add to it the zones
Overlay.
that we want it to cover.
Okay, I'll second that.
At the same time for voting?
Okay,
Not now, here, tonight, no.
No, I said when,
Further discussion, work
council.
session.
the work session.
So we get, council will give us some language, comes here, we'll sit down, we look at the language, we say, where do we want it, thrash it out, and then that goes to
I
warrant.
missed work session, I missed that.
Yeah.
Okay, any other?
Just food for thought. I have more concerns than I do otherwise about specifying particular zones and excluding others without having some very broad, open, public communication about what this zone means.
We can work on that.
That's part of the public hearing.
And one of the things I'm going to suggest is that as we look forward in this world, the people who work here in Wolfeboro are going to be more energy efficient if they live in Wolfeboro rather than having to drive from Rochester or Farmington or somewhere else.
That's right.
And so we need to be thinking about how we as a community can help to deal with these people.
And
deal
try to
with energy
prevent
issues.
sprawl. We are hopefully trying to prevent urban sprawl. We are trying to maximize the use of our town in an attractive way.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I'll call for the vote. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, Susan, did you, were you
I said aye.
abstaining?
No.
Oh, okay, all right. So you raised your hand. All right, okay, very good. So we're going to get something from our town attorney that will come back with some wording for an ordinance to then discuss with the selectmen.
All right.
Okay, next item on the agenda, I've lost my damn agenda. Lighting committee update. Okay.
So this was last presented essentially the same as what you have tonight. I did meet with John and make some updates to the language that didn't make it into the last draft. So this is the complete and final edition of the committee's recommendations on lighting changes. What you're looking at on the first sheet, 175-53.1 lighting and illumination, that is the current section in the what we call the general regulations, or not the site plan regulations. What this does under B is saying that all lighting in the town of Wolfeboro shall be installed with the applicable sections of the town of Wolfeboro site plan regulations, outdoor lighting. No, that does not mean that residential lighting requires site plan review. This is just putting all the regulations in one section of the ordinance for consistency. And 173.27.2 outdoor lighting, that is in site plan review. There's a purpose statement, basically the same purpose statement that it currently has. There are definitions. My recommendation is to move all of those definitions out of site plan review and move them into the general definitions, i.e. 175. So it would read 173.27.2 outdoor lighting. First topic would be purpose. Second topic would be permit requirements on the bottom of the second page. Talks about general lighting requirements, control of glare, luminaire design factors. And under C, you have residential lighting, i.e. 1 and 2 family. This is the same stuff with a couple of minor tweaks that are currently in the general section of the regulations. For those not keeping up, 175.53.1 is currently where those residential lighting requirements are. And it gets into commercial lighting. And it's very clear once you get into commercial lighting that you're going to site plan review and all of those things follow through.
The last section, last sentence in paragraph D.
Paragraph. Which paragraph?
Paragraph D, D for David, commercial lighting.
Yes.
That last sentence, the planning board shall adopt regulations, does that stay in?
No. These are those regulations.
That's why I raised the issue.
Okay, so that we should take that out?
Yep.
Everything else is essentially the same until you get down to prohibitions. Prohibitions are across the board. That's not just commercial lighting, that's prohibitions to, remember, that's prohibitions as a subheading under 173.27.2 outdoor lighting. That's where you get into your mercury vapor, laser lights, search lights, neon, non-cutoff wall pack. 6 is a new ism, if you will, light emitting diodes, 2,000 to 4,500 Kelvin. Kelvin was added as a definition. And then 7 was added, moving light, or those that give the appearance of movement lights, fluttering lights, blinking lights, or flashing lighting device, or prohibited. Now, that is not intended to mean blinking Christmas lights. Go back to residential lighting, there's an exception. That exception would carry through the prohibition for accent lighting, low wattage, seasonal lighting, and other fixtures commonly associated with residential uses are not intended to be prohibited by this section. That would include the prohibitions, so you could have blinking Christmas lights on your porch, roof, etc.
Lasers are actually very low wattage. Are they part of the exemption for accent lighting, or seasonal lighting? In other words, could I have a laser?
It's currently a prohibition. I'm not married to it.
I mean, I would say that type of thing is, that kind of bright light is not what you need, so I would keep it as a prohibition. But is that outlined here, or is that?
Lasers?
They're low wattage.
Prohibitions.
Oh.
Like if
so
somebody had a
if we-
disco or something at a function or something, and the lights were going all like that?
Harkening back to my camping trips, one of the things that came out a couple of years ago was this canned light you can get at Walmart for about $20 that will shoot a picture on something. I don't think that would be construed as a laser. I
No.
think the intent of a laser is one that would be of a intensity that could cause damage if someone were to inadvertently walk in front of it and stare at it. I hear laser, I think Space Odyssey and things.
In prohibitions, number 7, makes better syntactical sense if you put the word lights after the word moving, in the beginning of that, and then get rid of the word lights after the word movement. And then comment, that sounds an awful lot like flickering Christmas lights to me on somebody's storefront.
Well, I was thinking more of a strobe light.
Well, it says flickering, fluttering, or blinking, and my Christmas lights blink.
But those are seasonal lights, so those are allowed.
They're
So it
allowed?
could, at the end, it could have an exception, section C exception.
Seasonal.
The intent was not to capture
Seasonal
Christmas lights. There's another enunciation of the open sign can be lit but not blinking.
So my Christmas lights are not going to put me in violation?
No.
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 Okay, thank you, John.
I've got comments here on the general requirements we're on page 3 here. That first paragraph there, can you fix some of the sentences? Kind of runs on, it's not like general requirements, it should be then number 1, all lighting, and then cutoff shielding, up lighting should probably be number 2. See what I mean when you read it?
Okay?
And then that next little paragraph that says the new installation of uplighting, any methods, do we even need that there? Because it says it somewhere else? Because we already said uplighting is prohibited. But that little paragraph there says, oh, but if I really like you, you can have them.
What the language currently says is that uplighting is prohibited, however, the planning board can review landscape lighting, which may be up.
But I really like you, is what it says to me. Mommy said no, she means no, not, oh, but you can have ice cream anyway, is what this says to me.
I'm perfectly fine.
I'm seeing that as yes, here, and then it's no there, but then it's yes over here. It's not definite. So are uplights prohibited or not?
Upward landscape lighting may be approved. Upward landscape lighting,
So this,
That's
this-
uplighting.
specific type of uplighting.
yeah, but it's illumination of the landscape only. It's not the floodlight showing how pretty the front of your house is.
That's explained in that paragraph that you're having
But
trouble
it
with.
still goes up to the world.
But it's a specific type of uplighting, which is explained right there.
A limited use on a
I know,
case-by-case
but still, if you go
basis.
up,
Well,
you can still
there
see it
are
from the
too many
airplane.
iterations of the same thing. So if it were to read, A, general lighting requirements, 1, all lighting in the town of Wolfeboro is required to have full cutoff shielding. 2, uplighting by any method is prohibited. However, the planning board may allow limited use of, now jump all the way down to upward landscape lighting
There you go, that works.
on a case-by-case
case-by-case
basis. May be approved goes away. So the planning board may allow limited use of upward landscaping lighting on a case-by-case, no, planning board may allow
Just
limited
rewrite it.
use of upward landscape lighting on a case-by-case basis, comma, providing the lighting does not spill onto neighboring properties or public ways.
how about if you just take off the providing also? We're just going to case-by-case basis.
Well, this is, to me, this is giving the planning board the criteria on which they evaluate their case-by-case.
Yeah. I would leave it.
Just remove the redundancy.
Yes.
Okay, in the, removing the guidelines, you're going to make a flyer out of this? That's what it says.
Well, when the lighting committee met, the idea was to remove all of the guidelines and to create a flyer.
Right.
Months later, your very own Mr. Goodwin came up with a flyer that does the very same thing. So to me, there's no need to create another flyer to go with the flyer that talks about uplighting and night, dark sky lighting and things of that sort. To me, this,
Water, view
considering
shed.
building or renovating in Wolfeboro, there's
Included this?
not to this detail, but the same message comes across. And to me, everything that is beyond that flyer is superfluous in here. It's not something that belongs in a regulation.
No, I agree with that, but I think that it was good information.
Put it into a flyer.
So I was
that's-
just gonna leave it to the board. If you want a standalone flyer to complement the
Well,
scenic, we'll do that.
Yeah, just something that is for lighting. I mean, the other one,
Makes us look like we're really working hard. We have 2
Right.
flyers now.
okay,
I will make a
Can we,
flyer.
can we make sure when this gets redone, Tavis, that we do the ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, that they all match?
Yes, what
Thank you.
what I have to do now is take 17553, show the strikeout text, the added text in red, I know you don't like that, and then do the same thing with 173.
Well, I like it sometimes, just this one is confusing.
okay, and Tavis, I'm still concerned about moving residential lighting into the site plan for single-family homes. I just don't see how it fits. I mean, the site plans are for commercial buildings and operations.
The intent of moving everything to the site plan regulations is so if the planning board wanted to change the lighting regulations in town, it could be done through a site plan public hearing. So you wouldn't have site plan being chased by the zoning ordinance or vice
Okay, well, that
versa.
doesn't, I mean, it doesn't change the direction that site plan regulations are for commercial establishments, not residential.
Correct, and this doesn't say that site plan is required for residential. It's just saying when you're dealing with
says-
lighting, it's just saying
Says
when you're looking for,
residential lighting, 1 and 2 family. And you told me the other day that we're actually going to delete it from the ordinance. From the,
well, no, you're not deleting it from the you're putting it in, you can't think of the ordinance as two separate pieces. Part of the
Well, I am
ordinance is,
thinking of it as two separate,
but they're not. Site plan is just a part of the zoning ordinance. So in this particular
it's,
case, if you're going through the zoning ordinance and you get to 175-53.1, okay, this talks about lighting and illumination. The purpose for having lighting and illumination is that paragraph. Then it says, all lighting in Wolfeboro shall be installed in accordance with the applicable sections of the site plan regulations.
okay, well, I have some concerns about this.
Yeah,
Because it just does not seem to fit in with the RSAs. And I mean, at one previous meeting, we talked about the fact that we were moving a lot of our zoning ordinances into site plan. I was okay with that because those were all for commercial plans and operations, and so that made sense to me. This does not make sense to me, and I don't know how we deal with it. I mean, I understand what we're trying to do.
Well, it could very simply be done by taking, start on the bottom of the second page, permit requirements through C, no longer calling it C, and start at B on the general regulations. So you could simply move it out. See what I'm saying? You could take the residential section out of site plan and just amend 175-53-1 to say that.
Okay,
It's just the committee felt it would be cleaner to put all of the lighting in one place.
I agree with Kathy. I don't think it fits. It seems to be apples and oranges, not the same species. The residential 1 and 2 family lighting should not be in site plan review. Should remain in regular zoning.
It's the board's pleasure. The other option would be to create a separate standalone lighting section of the ordinance, which is just simply adopting Chapter 175, make up a number, lighting and illumination, and let it run just the way it is. And then,
right. I didn't see anything the matter with that, the way it was.
the big problem with the way it currently is that 175-53-1 and 173-27-2 don't correlate. So the idea was to avoid miscorrelation in the future, put it all in the same place.
Yeah, but then you're putting apples and oranges in the same basket.
Not really.
Well, site plan review, like Kathy says, is for commercial structures. For single-family residences.
Okay, well, I'll bite. All of the definitions are in 175, 175, but not all of them are commercial. Some are residential.
Not a good analogy.
It's darn
Definitions
close.
are a big basket in which you can put apples and oranges. Expect to find apples and oranges in your definition basket. When you look in when you look in site plan review, you don't expect to find regulations governing single-family homes, residences. Expect to find ordinances governing commercial operations. And we are not respecting that distinction by putting residential lighting into site plan review.
So you're saying,
So
take
add
the
to
exact-
175-53-1, permit requirements, general lighting requirements, control of glare luminaire design factors, and the
And
1 and
C.
2 family section, and then duplicate all but C in site plan.
I see no reason why that should be a problem.
Yeah,
A few extra lines in
Drag and drop.
ordinances.
okay.
Would that satisfy your concern?
Right. Yes. Yes, it would. Okay, anything else?
Does everybody understand what was just done? Good.
I think we'll see it later.
Yep, a month.
Correct.
Okay, so what, the next step then, is this one pretty much ready for public hearing?
No, I'm going to bring it back at your next meeting rewritten with tonight's updates, and then that will have the track changes in it, and then you can set that for public hearing.
Okay. Good. Anything else, folks?
Well, I have one thing here that was the illuminate lighting for panels for interior,
This,
yes. And Tavis spoke about that last time, so
So one of the things the lighting committee also looked at was the bottom image on that email that you received. And there was a
We're
subsequent
talking about this.
subsequent discussion at the lighting committee to make a revision to the sign ordinance, and I will bring that to the next meeting. I don't think it's fair for the board to discuss this email as received today without time to prepare. It brings back the same question: are they signs, are they not signs, are they lights, are they not lights? And I will have time to put together a memo to that effect for the board at your next work session.
Fine.
thank you.
Okay, let's see, no public comments. Review of the minutes, August 3rd. So, Mary Jane, how come all the votes said 6?
I think for board discussion, as long as everyone is sure that the abstentions or nay votes are correctly recorded, the minutes can reflect the appropriate vote.
Yeah, just add one.
Yeah, okay. Any other corrections for August 3rd?
I have a couple.
Okay,
We figured it out.
what happened?
Vaughn came in late.
oh,
The template was filled in before she got here, so there weren't,
I figured that it had to be something like that.
Let's do something
I
simple.
couldn't remember.
All right, I have just a couple, real simple, page 11. The paragraph says Mike Hutter,
Wait a minute.
first line, I'm sorry,
first paragraph?
the one that says Mike Hutter.
Or
Made a motion to grant, delete the word parking.
Oh, Mike Hodder made a motion to grant
A
a
waiver.
waiver.
a waiver for parking, not parking, a waiver.
And then on page 13, the paragraph that starts Mike Hutter up at the top, delete the first sentence in its entirety. I think I was that incoherent.
Did housing opportunity zones all be in quotes?
No, just delete Mike Hutter down to the end of warrant and leave the second and third sentences stand. Page 13. Near the very top, Mike Hutter asked how, at the very top of that page.
Yes,
Delete that sentence.
correct.
Everything else in that paragraph can stand.
You want housing opportunity zones or housing opportunity zones, all in quotes?
It's irrelevant to me.
Okay.
That's all I have, Madam Chairwoman.
Any other comments, corrections? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve these with the corrections made.
Moved.
I'll second it. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, very good. Anyone want to make a motion to?
Seconded.
Okay.
Made it
All in
in a couple of
favor?
minutes.
Right.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Kathy.